we've kind of reached a point where there is going to be less lecture and more doing. So the talking is mostly behind us, which is exciting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a few just one light demos using one flash. And I mentioned it earlier, but one thing that's kind of unique to this space is that there is so much white around, so white kind of bounces everywhere, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It actually fills things in and is very forgiving. But in some cases, if you're trying to do a very contrasty look, you might need to bring in a lot of either black V-flats like that, or there's also something called 4x4 floppies. And what they are is they are 4x4 frames of duvetine. They're very similar to these frames, but they are black. And then they have some fabric that you can actually take down, and it folds down so you get twice the height. So a kind of a 4-foot area becomes an 8-foot area, and you can put those around. So just keep in mind that like right now I'm just going to take a few shots with a bare bulb to show you what that looks like. Usually it would be a lot harsher and a lot, the shadows would be a lot deeper if we didn't have a white ceiling kind of right there and have this white cove all around it. So what you'll notice is that fills in a lot around the model. And what I'll try to do is I'll try to show you kind of on the screen if, you know, where you can imagine like dark shadows being. And actually I should have demonstrated this earlier, but the triggers just fit into the hot shoe of your camera. So you just slide it in, tighten it down so it doesn't move, and you're good to go. Right here, and okay, let's see what we got. So actually that's not an entirely unpleasing light. And also, if we weren't in this white environment, this shadow under the chin would probably be completely black. Yeah, but there's a nice little, you know, small catch light in the eyes. Let's put on a beauty dish to see what that does to the light. And one thing about a beauty dish is that where you aim it is very specific. If you don't aim it directly at the model's face, what you're going to get is, you know how there's that center section that doesn't allow direct light to come through? As you start to get off axis, the direct light will actually start to hit the model, and it'll create kind of like different areas of light on the face that you're not intending. So what I usually do is I usually kind of come behind the model and I try to see where she is, and that actually looks pretty good. Andrew, maybe just like a few degrees down. Cool, and then Erica, I'm going to have you move this way ever so slightly. Yep, right about there I think should be good. Okay, great. Yes, yes. And actually when we get a little closer I can show you the difference in a minute. So let's see, right here, looking gorgeous. Okay, so I'm going to stop this down. So that's my overexposed one, and then that's actually probably a little underexposed. If you could compare the bare bulb to, it's a little bit to the right. Yeah, the bare bulb to that one. Okay, so one thing you'll notice is that it's subtle, but there is a little bit more of a gradation around the beauty dish shadow than there is on the hard light. And that's kind of what a beauty dish generally gives you, is something that's a little bit like sunlight, but just a touch softer. Andrew, let's actually bring the beauty dish in closer. And again, I'm going to come back here and make sure. So Andrew, it needs to be angled down. Right here, great. Excellent, there we go. Okay, cool. So one thing that is actually happening here is that as the light gets closer to her, the background gets a little bit darker. And that's called fall off. There's a fancy word for it, which is the inverse square law, which means the closer you are to a light source, the faster that light will go from light to dark, and the further away you are, the amount that it goes from light to dark is larger. So for instance, if you have two people in a shot and you have the light right here next to one of them, you have the other person standing here, the light between the two of them is going to be very different because the light's so much closer to this person than it is to the other person. Move the light further away and those two people will be exposed a little more closer together. The same thing happens with the background and the model. So if we want to make the background even darker, we move both the light and the model away from the background. On the other hand, if we like that, we like the background going white, we would then move both towards the background. Let's also see what this negative fill does, and I have no idea. So there we go. So that's one way to do it, is to add a light. So that should come up in a second. So there you see we have a completely white background. But if we didn't have that other light, we can move both closer to the background. So Andrew, let's do this. Let's get the V-flat out there and get that other light kind of off to the side too. And this right here is called a high roller, or this is a medium roller, I guess, huh? Medium. But obviously it rolls, which is great. And it's nice and beefy so it can support a boom arm, which is what this is called. And you can put lights up there and not worry about the arm bending or the stand not being powerful enough. So let's actually put you up against this wall. So we'll go back just as far as we can and before we start to step on the curve there, and we'll come to you. Because we're closer to the background, we should have a little bit whiter background, if not a completely white background. Let's see, yep. So it's a little bit whiter. It's still not entirely white, but if we bring the light back, which will change the quality of the light on her, I'm going to have to open up. Let's see what we got here. Oops, that's way overexposed. Oh, something happened on that one. Oops, I shot too fast. So that's exactly what happens when you shoot above your sync speed. I think this camera is supposed to be rated at 250, and that was what I was at. But let me try 200 and see if that helps. Great. And then, oops, Andrew, let's move it back even a little bit more. Great, and I think I might need to tilt up a little bit now. Okay. Great. Awesome. Actually, I'm going to get closer right here. Great. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So this is what starts to happen when you start getting a beauty dish too far away, is you get this kind of look. It's not as flattering. It's not as good. For my money, 4 feet or less is kind of the sweet spot for a beauty dish to get that beauty dish look. The light gets a little harder. It gets a little bit harder to distinguish it between just a bare bulb. You don't get kind of that, again, beauty dish look that you get when it's a little closer. So there is an exposure difference there, but so the way that I measure that, and I actually do sometimes measure it, is from the model's nose to the center of the modifier. 4 feet. Where did my measuring tape go? So I'll kind of show you guys. Let's move this to the side. We'll rotate it this way so that you guys kind of get a profile of this. And then if you could kind of step into where, thank you. So what I would do is, let's say 43 inches, which is just a little less than 4 feet. I'd put this here and then say, Erica, if you could bring your nose over here. That's a little bit low, so we need to raise the light. Andrew. There we go, and that's right about there is 43 inches. So that should, background's gonna be a little different, but it should give me more of the beauty dish look. Yep, there it is. That'd be great, actually, yeah. Yep, to the center right in here. Yeah, and if it's a softbox, I usually do the center also. It's the same thing. Different photographers have different places that they'll measure to in front. I mean, always the nose, but different place on the light. As long as you're using the same point in the light every time, you'll be consistent. Okay, so right here. Beautiful. And there we go. So more of that beauty dish look with, what was that? What are your settings? At the moment, and actually we'll jump in and we'll shoot this as it is. My settings are 200th of a second, f11, and ISO 100. So if you guys want to jump in and shoot this, you are more than welcome. This is what's called a honeycomb grid, named for the shape of the grid. And what this does to a light is it concentrates it and doesn't allow it to spread out as much. I'll demonstrate that in just a second for you here. Andrew, could I use your exceptional height to see if we can snap this in? There we go. Someone was asking me earlier about what I was doing back here. If you want to come over and see. Okay, so hold it there actually for a second. Andrew, I want to just demonstrate. Come on over. Yeah, and if people want to see and kind of gather around kind of this area. So right now, if I kind of look behind her, I can tell that this is pointed pretty much right at her face. Oh, it's sagging now. So it's kind of falling a little bit in front. So that's what I'm doing.
You have to be like behind her?
It helps a little bit. You can be. I mean, that's kind of the way I like to do it, just to make sure. Because yeah, exactly. Because from over here, like it looks like it's a little bit off, but then I come over here and it kind of looks like it's correct. So.
And that black dot needs to hide her head?
Yes, or her head needs to hide the black dot. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Got it. What are we doing? So in order to make sure that this is focused correctly at her, you want her head to block the black dot. So Andrew, actually, do you mind kind of moving it so we can see when it's, so when it's off axis, you can see that, and actually more like maybe a left to right to demonstrate a little better. Okay, so I'm actually going to shoot this real quick. Andrew, let's lock it in. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see the effect of this, but it does make it a little bit harder, and it doesn't spread out as much. So the next one light setup I'm going to show you is a little bit different than what you kind of think of. A lot of photography and portrait photography says you kind of go 45 degrees from the subject, right? So it's like right here. This one, we're actually going to go a little bit overhead. And remember before, I did talk about that causing raccoon eyes, but I'm going to show you how we avoid raccoon eyes in this setup and why it works. And I'm going to get the foam core in this photo, but whatever. Okay, so let me bring these up on the screen. I'll show you what's going on here. Okay, so this is what happens when the light is directly overhead, when we have her in the center of the light. We get the raccoon eyes. Not great. And to be honest, this is probably not where I want to be either, because her eyes still have a little bit of a raccoon effect. What is nice about it is that it's light. It highlights the planes of her face nicely. And then we add in the reflector underneath, and then it smooths out those dark places on the face. So from that to that. Let's see. I'm going to do this again. Let's just use this. It'll be fine. But what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you actually tilt your head back a little bit, maybe bring your chin up, and you're going to be kind of guiding your face toward the light. Great. Excellent. Right there. Great. And maybe even have your eyes coming up. There we go. Maybe right here. There we go. Great. Awesome. Okay. What that does then, by bringing her chin up and kind of more into the light, is it makes the light fall into the planes of her face a little bit more. So you can see there that it's, it's a little bit softer and nicer. It doesn't create quite the same dark shadows under the eyes. This I would probably, if I had more time, finesse it a little bit more to get it where I want it to be, but that's the general idea of kind of an overhead light, almost imitating like a skylight coming in from natural light. Let's move the softbox to the side actually and put it in kind of a more traditional position. With this, I'm going to create a few of those lighting patterns, and what you'll notice is that even if we leave the light in the same place, as we move her, the lighting pattern on her is going to change. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of a smaller softbox. And this is kind of the effect that you can get with a softbox. So right here I'm starting off with a loop light, so there's that little loop under the nose. And then as I move around and move, as she turns, you'll see that we come into a Rembrandt. So there's a Rembrandt light. One thing I would say, Andrew, let's bring in one of those V-flats. What I'm seeing here is that this side of the face goes completely dark. I'd like to just kick a little bit more light into that side of the face when we're in the Rembrandt position. So Eric, if I could have you stand back in. Excellent, and right here, nice. Okay, so that should, whoa, that kicks a lot more light back into her than I was expecting.
Take it up a little bit?
Yeah, let's bring it back. So with that V-flat so close to her, it actually took away a lot of the contrast that I was liking. I was trying to just get a little bit of a kick of light, but look at the difference between, let's see, this and this. So just the amount of fill light that comes in from that side. And we'll discuss key fill and backlight in a moment. Let's see about, and actually, you know what? Maybe even something smaller if this doesn't work, but let's take a look. Come towards me just a little bit, and then this way just a little bit, great. Okay. Cool, okay. So that's kind of in the middle, that's good. So this last one, I got a little bit more fill into that side. Not quite as much as that one. I still have kind of a Rembrandt pattern that's kind of clearly visible. The difference between those two, it's subtle, but there's just a little bit more light here in the cheek. We still have the Rembrandt pattern, but it's not going completely black. So if you guys want to jump in really quick, just 2 or 3 frames on this one and try it from different angles around her just to see what it does to the nose shadow. So the first one, you'll actually be probably pretty close up to the softbox, like right next to it here, to try to get like a loop light. And then you'll come around to the side and have her follow you. Okie dokie.